Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. I will now ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, November 21st, 2024, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, November 21st, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 7. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 8, approving the creation of and proposed roster for the WIS Admin Code Chapter PSC 114 Technical Advisory Committee and directing commission staff to draft correspondence, confirming committee appointments and submitting the list to JCRAR. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 9, accepting all uncontested alternatives listed in the final decision matrix and directing commission staff to prepare an order approving Wisconsin Power and Light Company's 2025 fuel cost plan consistent with those determinations. Or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 10, accepting all of the uncontested alternatives listed in the final decision matrix and directing commission staff to prepare an order approving Madison Gas and Electric's 2025 fuel cost plan consistent with those determinations.
Thank you. I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 6 and 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. In docket 1AC 259, I move we approve the proposed roster for the Chapter PSC 114 Technical Advisory Committee and direct staff to confirm the appointments and submit the list to JCRAR.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. In docket 6680 ER 104, I move we approve the 2025 fuel cost plan for Wisconsin Power and Light.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. In docket 3270 ER 101, I move we approve the 2025 fuel cost plan for Madison Gas and Electric.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 11, docket 4220 ER 103, which is the application of Northern States Power Company for approval of its 2025 fuel cost plan. Commissioner Hawkins is actually going to lead our discussion of this today, so I will turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Strand. So today we are discussing the 2025 fuel cost plan of Northern States Power Company, Wisconsin, as just mentioned. Today there are 5 of the 8 issues that are uncontested in this docket, so we will not be discussing those. And we'll be spending our time on the 3 remaining contested items. So after a brief background on each of the contested items, we will discuss each issue separately, and I will introduce each issue briefly and provide my position before turning it over to my colleagues. So just a quick background on this process. Per WIS Admin Code 116.03, each of Wisconsin's 5 major investor-owned utilities must file a proposed fuel cost plan for each calendar year, either as part of a general rate case proceeding or as a standalone proceeding limited in scope to the fuel costs, which is what we have here today. This fuel cost plan must include a calculation of certain fuel costs as described in the admin code, as well as other information required in 116.03. So after hearing, the commission approves the utility's fuel cost plan and establishes the utility's rates in accordance with the approved fuel cost plan. There were no interveners in this case and no public comments were received. And so just to preview the topics that we're going to talk about here today, that after staff completed the audit of the applicant's fuel cost plan, there were 7 adjustments proposed to what the applicant brought forward. And there are 3 still in dispute, as I mentioned earlier. So we will be talking through an adjustment related to NSP system fuel costs related to MISO charges and credits, a downward adjustment related to the equivalent forced outage rates of NSP's coal units, and a downward adjustment related to the expected capacity sales revenues. So those are the 3 we're going to talk through. And before we do that, I will turn it over to my colleagues to see if they have any opening remarks.
Nothing for me other than thanking you for the very helpful introduction and just to the staff and to the applicant for all their work on this.
Same thanks to the staff and to the applicant. And in addition to the general context that you set very well for us, Commissioner Hawkins, I would just say before we get into the contested items that really, I think to my mind, the goal of setting these costs is, like you said, we're setting an estimate, and we're setting an estimate of volatile costs. And we're setting it subject to deferral accounting and then a true up that will happen because by their nature, these are costs that are hard to predict. So we're going to basically put our estimate into base fuel rates and then true up the difference later. And part of the goal I think we really want to achieve is to get as close to the correct cost as possible, hopefully without going over. And I really think some of that goes to what you're talking about in the Chapter 116 rules. I think if we get too far over or under, we basically get into a credit position. And a credit position is when we're overestimating. And if we overestimate beyond a 2% tolerance, that estimate has to be paid back to customers with interest at the short-term debt rate. And in a lot of cases, including last year, that leaves customers paying basically a net premium on the fuels. And then the same on the other side. If we're underestimating too far, we get into a surcharge. There's interest paid back by customers at the short-term debt rate. So to me, it's kind of like the Price is Right. You want to get as close as you can without going over, essentially, because there are some consequences to customers and to the utility either way, and that's the lens with which I looked at these contested items. So thanks.
Thank you. We have the correct microphones for Price is Right, so this is great. Awesome. So we'll dive in. We'll go to issue 2, which was a question related to what the appropriate review period should be to set the basis for the estimate for the applicant's MISO charges and credits. So the computer's gone fully blurry. I'm going analog. That's very strange. So issue 2, the applicant filed an estimate of the MISO charges based on a 36-month period from April 2021 through March 24. They argue that the accounts, that 36-month window accounts for impacts of wind and solar generation on congestion charges, which are anticipated to grow next year. Commission staff proposed a 12-month period and provided an updated exhibit, basically with the most recent 12 months, which goes through September of *24. And then in rebuttal testimony, alternatives of 24 months were offered by staff and 30 months was offered by the applicant. So getting right to it, my position on this one is alternative 2, which is the 24-month staff proposal that came in the rebuttal testimony. A little bit of a justification for why I am supportive of the 24-month window. The original estimates basically before we had the most recent information were pretty far apart in a very significant range, all these different alternatives. As we got closer and have the more recent months, this 24-month period is much closer to some of the earlier totals that the applicant was asking for. And at the same time, the projection of gas prices were going down for next year, and that's a main contributor to these congestion charges. So I saw a lot of factors sort of coming together to show this as the most reasonable estimate, getting the prices right, as Commissioner Nieto was saying. So I also wanted to highlight my concern with the period of spring '21 through summer of '22. There were some anomalous conditions that I believe are behind us, and we can't reasonably expect them to repeat themselves in 2025. So I don't think it would be reasonable to include that period of time that the applicant requested in this estimate of what we expect to see going forward. And Lastly, I did agree with what staff raised as far as changes in the transmission system. There's a lot of steps always being taken to reduce congestion, and only the most recent information and periods of time capture those changes. And so I think keeping to a 24-month, which is shorter than 36 months, is the best way to handle that. So I am at alternative 2.
Thank you. I'm at alternative 2 as well for basically the reasons that you said. And I do understand the applicant's position, but I just didn't see anything in the record that showed that it was necessary or more accurate to move to a longer average than the 12 or the 24. The commission did authorize a 24-month average for the MISO charges and credits for NSP last year. So I think that that's a nice way to kind of be consistent. And as Commissioner Nietzsche pointed out, this will be trued up in 2025. It's just a forecast. So I think alternative 2 is a very fair way to be for how we're going to account for this. So alternative 2 for me. Thank you.
Thanks to you both. I was at initially alternative 1 with alternative 2 as a very close second. I think to Commissioner Hawkins' point, Alt 1 and Alt 2 result in essentially the same numbers now that the updated fuel run is in. So really the almost the same outcome. I agree with the rationale that both of you have provided, and I would say what also factored into this for me is that I think the company pointed out that staff's 12-month look is resulting in lower costs than the 2023 and 2022 actuals show, but also the 2023 this line item in 2023 was significantly over-collected, and it was reaching back and using that 2021 anomaly. And then our 2024 number that's currently in progress also reaches back and uses that number, and it's on track to be significantly over-collected as well. So I think this is the right approach. I think the only other thing I would say is I do appreciate, and I think there's some merit to NSPW's suggestion that we should use averaging periods that are long enough to smooth out some of the variances and some of those anomalies over time, and to capture that. But I also didn't find compelling evidence that we need to keep going back to that 2021 year, particularly as we are looking at these averaging periods case by case, just like the applicant points out. And in this docket, we are seeing some of those big over collections that are coming in due to using the 2021 number. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you both. It sounds like we are in agreement there on Alt 2. So we will move on to issue 3, and this is, should the commission accept commission staff's proposed adjustments to the outage rate, or ES adders, as they are referred to, used for the applicant's coal facilities. The ES adders are incremental forced outage rates, basically, to increase the expectation of these units to not be available given their closeness to retirement and their new dispatch patterns that the applicant explains, and how they're used differently than they were historically used as baseload facilities. So the question before us pertains to the reasonableness of this methodology of using these adders. And I am supportive of these ES adders and disagree with the staff's adjustment. So for me, that leaves me at alternative 2, which is accept the applicant's filed ES adders. I thought the applicant did a good job in their spreadsheet and testimony explaining that they have the historical outage information, and then they pulled these additional adders that were independent for each unit that shows it was just a really thorough analysis, and I did not believe that there was any double counting going on, and the back and forth between staff and the applicant, I think, proved that out to me. So I'm comfortable including these, and also think it's just reasonable given you can see a clear trend in how these units' outage rates have been increasing upwards year over year as they get near their retirement, that this is really the only way to reflect that going forward, because historical doesn't capture that as much, just because there's still some years with really low outage rates compared to the recent past. So I am at Alt 2 on this one.
Thank you. I went back and forth on this one, but I'm very comfortable with Alt 2, and I think the reasons that you described are way more articulate than I could be on this one. So I can absolutely join you there. Thank you.
Yeah, I was initially at alt 1 on this one. I think one thing that concerned me was just more of a statement in testimony, and I think you make a good point of how the numbers are reflected and how we see them bear out in the spreadsheet, but, and I think this is what staff was picking up on too, was that those incremental increases in outages, which are what the ES adders represent, they're due to equipment issues that are attributable to the declining capital investment in the plants as they near retirement. And then those increases were determined by the company's energy supply unit, and the company testified that that increment was converted to a rate which was then added to the historical 5-year average. So based on that testimony, it appears that the company was testifying that the incremental numbers that the ES adders represent were already baked into the 5-year, and then so they're baked into the 5-year, and then it sounds like they're being added on top of the 5-year, which I think is where it starts to sound like double counting. Let me see here. I think based on that, I would stay at alt 1. In addition, I know the company also testified that its methodology was approved in another jurisdiction without concern, and that wasn't incredibly compelling to me because we have different fuel requirements jurisdiction by jurisdiction. I think I didn't see in the testimony itself that explanation regarding how those ES numbers were or were not baked in to the 5-year average that I would have needed to see. So I'm at alt 1.
Okay. And I found in there, in one of their exhibits that they presented, the applicant presented, a removal of some reserve shutdown hours to avoid double counting, and it was called out in like the notes tab of that. And I tried to clarify with staff if that was the concern or not, but I think because it's described by the applicant as an incremental adder that's applied after the fact, I don't know how it could be in the historical information and then added. And so I never saw how it got baked into the historical data to be double counted. And so that was why I was never at alt 1. And you were explaining it, and I don't know if I missed something, but if you have anything to add there. I read the same thing as the energy supply unit created these adders, but I didn't see it circling back through to the historical to then be added on again another time. So that's was my disconnect there.
Yeah, and I think the way that you're seeing it and the way you looked at it in your review makes sense to me too. And I think we're kind of circling around questions that to me just weren't articulated and explicitly answered in the record, even though staff teed it up and said, we think this is double counting for this reason. And the response to that didn't articulate and pin down exactly that confirmation that I think I'm looking for, and that you might have found a little bit more in the notes in the spreadsheet, but it just wasn't articulated in the record.
Okay. Cheers,
I agree that that part of the record was thin, which is part of the reason why we are in differing positions and discussing this a little further. So I would just hope that the applicant would hear that this is something that if they're going to continue to seek, that they would do a better job of developing that so that we have a little more certainty either way about the potential for double counting or not.
Yep.
Yep, I think with that, I can join you both. I don't need to dissent, but yes, I'd like to see this articulated a little bit more clearly in the future. And I also noted that the same issue was teed up in the previous two fuel cost plans and the ES adders were not brought in, which again brought me down a little bit more on the side of alt 1.
Okay.
But again, I can join you.
Okay. Sounds good. That leaves us with our final issue of the day, which is issue 4. Should the commission accept commission staff's proposed adjustment to the capacity sales revenue? And I am at alt 1, which is accept the commission staff's proposed adjustment. This issue is related to the forecasted future capacity sales from the MISO Planning Reserve Auction. And right now, the applicant is proposing to just use the certain sales numbers that are available through May of 2025 from last year's auction, and not including anything for the remaining 7 months of the year. I think the proposal to just use the numbers from the past auction are reasonable for two different reasons, really. The last auction had very average normal prices, so they're not really out of the ordinary or extreme. And so I think that sets up for a true up in a good way, because it's not either high prices or low prices. It's kind of run-of-the-mill prices. And then I also was just a little disappointed in the applicant's approach to not even attempting to forecast their capacity position for next year. It might be how the practice has always been, but I do know that there's a lot of information available like right now, and the applicant should know generally what their capacity position will be for next year, that an attempt could have been made to provide something as far as what these revenues may look like, instead of just saying it's volatile and hard to predict, so I will not attempt to predict. And so that is another reason I'm supportive of staff's proposal to just use the past year's auction results to continue on for the remainder of the 2025 year. So yeah, that's all I have on that one.
Thank you. I was also at alternative at 1, and I felt that the staff's methodology to arrive at the forecast was much more accurate and data-based than what we got from the applicant. So I'm very comfortable with alt 1. Thank you.
Thanks. I was at alt 1 as well, and I agree with both of your comments. I think I noted under this issue a couple of things. As we said at the outset, the whole purpose of this exercise is to set an estimate on costs that are volatile. And so then to say that these sales are too volatile to set a cost for, this is why they're included in the Chapter 116 fuel rules as a specific item that we're supposed to be estimating here. So capacity sales revenue specifically falls under the fuel rules and under the fuel cost tolerance bandwidth of 2%. So it does need to be estimated. Capacity sales for resale are more volatile than, say, purchase capacity costs, which are unmonitored for that reason. And it's intentional that both the utility and customers share the risk on capacity sales revenue for this reason, and that it falls under the 2% threshold, just like purchase energy does. So I do think it's inconsistent and risks erring on the side of overbilling when there are proposals to estimate high on costs, like MISO charges, and then to estimate low or not estimate on revenues or gains that are coming in. And therefore, I'm at alt 1 as well.
Well
Thanks.
said. I think we're all in agreement there. And I didn't need to go through the uncontested items, did I?
No.
Okay.
So we're probably ready for a motion if you guys have everything you need. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, in docket 4220 ER 103, I move we approve the fuel cost plan of Northern States Power Company, Wisconsin, pursuant to our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That does conclude our official business for today. I want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 5th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, December 5th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.